So after understanding the theoretical portion of equivalent fractions, let's do some problems to find out equivalent fraction of any given fraction. And let's say that we have the first one is, let's say we have 1 by 7. Now if someone asks you that to tell 5 equivalent fractions of this fraction, you have to tell 5 equivalent fractions. So if you multiply 1 by 7 both numerator and denominator by the same number, if you multiply it by 2 and by 2, so if you multiply this, or let me write it like this, if I multiply numerator and denominator by same number, that is by 2 and by 2, then you'll get what? 1 times 2 is 2 and 7 times 2 is 14. So 2 by 14 is the first one. Next one will be, let's say 1 by 1. If I multiply by same number, let's say that we this time multiply by 4. So this will be 4, sorry, it was 7. It was 7. So this will be 4 by what? 28, right? So this is the second one. If I multiply 1 by 1, if this is 1 by 1, and if I multiply this with, let's say 6, 7, this is 7. If I multiply it with 6, then this will be 6 by 42. This is the third one. If I multiply 1 by 1 by, let's say by what? Let's say 10. Hey, that's why am I writing 1 each time? It's 10. So this will be 10 by 70. This is the fourth one. If I write 1 by 7 and multiply this with, let's say what, 12, if we multiply it with 12, then this will be 12 by 84. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. These are the 5 equivalent fractions of 1 by 7. So the way is, you have to multiply the same, multiply numerator and denominator by the same number, and it doesn't matter what number you're using. You can use 2, you can 10, 11, 100, 1000, whatever. You'll get, whatever fractions you'll get, that will be the same equivalent fractions for this 1 by 7. If you want to take one more example, then let's say that this time let's find only 2. If it is 11 by 13, so if I have to find 3, let's say 3 equivalent fractions for 11 by 13, so if I multiply by 2, this will be 22 by 26. If I multiply 11 by 11, if I do multiply this with 3, this will be, sorry, this is 13, right? What has happened to me? Why am I writing it? So this will be 33, this will be 33, and this will be 39. So this is second one. Okay, the third one you find by yourself. So if this is the first one, if this is second one, third one is for your homework. These are the 2 equivalent fractions to 11 by 13. Okay, for 11 by 13. These are the equivalent fractions. This is one way to find equivalent fractions of any given fraction. Let's discuss a second way. Let's say that we have a fraction. What? Let's say 100 by 120. If I have to find, let's say, 2 equivalent fractions of this, one way could be the same one, that you go on multiplying it. That is one way. And in this video, since we have said that we are going to talk about the second way will be that you divide these two numbers, this numerator and denominator, by the same number that you are going to use. So let's say that I divide this 100 and 120, divide this 100 and 120 by 2. So if you divide 100 by 2, you'll get 50. And if I divide 120 by 2, I'll get 60. So this is one fraction. Okay. If I divide 100 by 5, one second, this is 100, this is 100. If I divide this by 5, this will be 20 divided by, sorry, this is 120. What has happened to me? Why am I writing denominator each time wrong? Gosh. This is 120. If I divide this 120 by 5, I'll get 5 to 10 and 24. This will be 20 by 24. Okay. If I divide this 100 by 120, this time I wrote it correctly. So 100 by 120, this is, if I divide this 100 and 120 by, let's say, by 10, this will be 10 by 12. So 50 by 60, 20 by 24, 10 by 12. I have divided these numbers by the same, these numerator and denominator, that is this fraction, by same number. I am getting the equivalent fraction. So this was one way that you multiply, numerator and denominator by the same number. Next way is, another way is to divide numerator and denominator by the same number, and in this case it was multiplication. But wait, in this case we can divide and we can find the equivalent fraction. But what about this case? In this case it was 1 by 7. If this was 1 by 7 and this was 11 by 13, can we find equivalent fraction by dividing this fraction? The answer will be no. Not in this case and not in this case. You'll ask why? Because there's no number other than 1 which can divide these two numbers, right? Because these 1 and 7 is a prime number, right? And if you try to find a common factor when we are dividing these numbers by the same number, that means that number is actually the common factor. Okay, in this case 2 was the common factor of 100 and 120. In this case 5 was the common factor of 100 and 120. In this case 10 is the common factor of 100 and 120. But what about this one? 1 by 7 can't be divided by any number other than 1. Okay, so these are co-prime numbers since they have only common factor as 1. Even in this case it is 11 by 13. You cannot find a fraction by dividing by this second method. You cannot find this one. Why? Because even in this case the only factor possible for 11 and 13 is common factor possible is what? 1. These are also co-prime numbers. So you cannot find out equivalent fractions in such cases where numerator and denominator has common factor as 1 only. Okay. If you want to see some other example, let's say that if you have 2 by 6, what about this one? Can you find equivalent fractions by this method, the division method that we used here? You can say yes, we can. Why? Because 2, if you divide numerator and denominator by 2, you'll get what? You'll get 1 by 3. What if it was 1 by 3? Can you find by dividing the second method? The answer is no, because 1 and 3 again they have only one common factor, and that is 1. So you cannot use a division one. Yes, you can use this multiplication method to find equivalent fractions.